he's still working on improving his Donald Duck again. Because he does, when he gets that dialed in, he sounds just like Donald. And for certain clips, Donald's a great person to do it because you're used to Donald going on a rant. If you ever want to see, you might actually, no offense, brother, but you might actually be able to remember this. People don't realize that Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck used to be foul-mouthed individuals when they were first invented. Okay, yeah, they were, because all of them. Bugs was too. Bugs used to cuss a lot. And before he became Mickey Mouse, it was Steamboat Willie. Same character, but he was Steamboat Willie. And he used to cuss a lot. And Donald, when he first came out, dude, he could hang with any sailor I've ever known. Political cartoons. They started as political cartoons for adults. Because I remember Bugs Bunny doing a rant about the slow-eyed buck-toothed Japanese. And he would, that cartoon would not be allowed in our woke culture today. It was leading up to it, yeah. Yep. Yeah, he did. Walt Disney did them. He drew them. But at that time, it was before he turned them into cartoons for kids. So, all right, prayers and praises. Anything for our list? Yes, sir.
Yes, my car, which
that's
it's been repaired. Hallelujah.
Woo, all right.
That's a good one. That's a praise that nobody got hurt too.
Got it?
There we go. Let me get out of there for you.
Well, I'm putting Deborah down because she's at the urgent care center right now for that cold. She's developed a cough, and I think her ear's got an infection. No fever yet, but that could be because there's acetaminophen or something. Well, she's taken so many different meds, there might be something that reduces the fever in one of those other medications. So.
It's like one of those deep coughs.
No, hers is more like of a raspy upper chest type cough. She's got laryngitis. She's had it all week. So.
Might be like a small version of bronchitis.
It could be, but her eustachian tube is really plugged. It's been causing her pain and she's waking up in the morning with her eye and her ear all crusty and everything. So, no, she doesn't sleep good to begin with. So.
Prayers for my sister, Carolyn.
Anything specific or?
She fell and hurt herself, but she's going on. She'll be 84 December. She doesn't need to live by herself. So prayers that we can get her out there, either to my other sister's house or my house.
Okay. You guys hear anything around your place lately that make you think we have coyotes in the neighborhood? Any sign whatsoever?
When did you hear it?
Deborah said she thought she heard dogs last night, and right before ours all jumped out of bed and went storming out the back door barking, and the two girls come running right back in, and Chief wouldn't get off the back porch. But that doesn't necessarily mean, with the way Deborah's ears are right now, she thought it was a dog, but not necessarily. But coyotes don't sound like dogs. So I don't know what she heard, but whatever it was, it made Sadie come running back in the house, and Chief wouldn't get off the porch. But he stayed out and barked at it.
It could have been that big cat.
Yeah, it could have been a cat, could have been a bear, because it's the right time of year for them to be around. But I just thought I'd ask you if you'd seen any signs, because if coyotes show up, I got to go hunting. So, they will not last, not around me. I'll go hunting. Yes. Oh, I know. They'd love to get a hold of everything. Like I said, they won't last long around me. I was raised to hunt different than the good old boys down here. I'm not just going to sit and wait on them. I'll go find their trail, and I'll come to them. And it won't last long. Yeah, I know you have. So.
We have a panther in our area.
He's not a panther. He's a jaguar.
Wow.
I've seen him. He's black. There are no black panthers. They're jaguars.
That's what I saw.
Okay, then you do have it. No, they're all right. Then maybe we have both. Anything else for our prayer list, folks? We could have both then. There are Florida Panthers in the area. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm late. I had to grab coffee at the kitchen. For the prayer / praise, Thursday morning, our oldest koala passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So just prayers for me and my parents, especially my mom. She's taking it hard because I was like her other baby. But it's also a praise because she was 15 years old. You know, she had a lot of health problems. Yeah.
Anything else? When are we going to go live up there? Oh, we've been live. Okay.
We've been live.
Good morning.
Let me call you Rabbi Joe.
No,
Rabbi Joe.
just Joe. Just Joe. Just Joe. That'll work.
That's why I asked.
We're trying an experiment today. Deborah watched us last Sabbath, and she said she was able to hear you, and she heard most of what Rick said, but this might help a little bit. All right, well then we'll get going. Yes, ma'am.
How is she feeling?
She's walking dead right now. She's not feeling good at all. She's at the urgent care clinic, but it's mostly her ear is all plugged up, and it's just constant ear pressure pain. But I think she has an infection now because she woke up, her eyes all red and full of crust and stuff. So I tried to get her to go to the doctor a couple of days ago, but as much as our wives like to tell us men that we're stubborn and we won't go to the doctor,
We're stubborn too.
y'all are worse. You'll drive us to the doctor so that we can get a little peace, but then we can't make you go.
We do that as Coco or CIA whenever you're sick.
You are welcome to come over and sit with my wife. And you will find out that it's a case of et tu, Brute. So, Father, I want to thank you. As always, thank you for your Sabbath that you've given us and for the season of the feasts, but also just for the fact that we in this country and in this part of our country are still able to gather in peace without fear of persecution. I fear that will not last much longer, Father, and I pray for your hedge of protection around our community and around this congregation. I thank you for the fact that you let us praise you for all the things you do in our lives and help us to see it, recognize your hand at work in our life, but also that we can come and lay our burdens of this life at your feet and that you'll handle them for us. I ask that you help us to see your hand at work and how you handle our problems as well. And then I just ask that you send your Spirit to be with us today as we study your servant John's gospel. Help us to gain a deeper understanding of your word through him and to better connect it to the rest of your word so that we have a more full and complete picture of how it is you'd have us to live and to live out your teachings in this world for the betterment of ourselves and others and for your glory and the glory of your Son. I ask all this in Yeshua's name. Amen. I actually got a prayer out that time. It's amazing when you quit thinking for yourself and just let the Spirit talk, ain't it? All right. Last class on John rabbits. Yeah, I got myself a list, but let's see if any of y'all have John rabbits. I know Sharky has to have something. So before we go to him, did anybody else find anything in John that just they like, they're puzzled by?
Yeah, I'm looking for them. I went over about it, right? But oh boy, there's a lot in this one.
John, that's why we've spent 3 weeks on
Yeah,
John.
This is towards this. I think it's the very last chapter.
I don't know how many of y'all have discovered these little puppies. These are Bible highlighters.
Yes.
Oh, I love these things. They won't bleed through to the other side of the page. No, they're highlighter, but they're not. They're a lighter dose of the ink, and you can get many different colors.
They don't bleed through.
Yeah, they don't bleed, and they make a gel one too, but I don't like the gel. Amazon. If you go on Amazon, you just put in Bible highlighter. They'll give you several different options. So I like these because it comes with a chisel tip and then a real fine tip. I use the fine tip, doesn't bleed through the other side of the page at all. So you can tell when you're reading behind me in the scriptures, you'll know where I've been because it's yellow. But if you ever grab, I've got like 6 copies of these. And if you grab one and you're ever reading everything underlined in blue, it's nothing but prophetic word in the scriptures. So I've kind of color coordinated mine. Do you have something, Sharky?
Yes, sir.
Shoot.
John 18:36.
I don't know if that was a good year or not.
18:36.
Okay, sir.
Yeshua answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be fighting, so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not this realm."
Mm-hmm. So what'd you get out of that one?
Kaiser.
The problem with that verse, as I would see and understand it, is that this kingdom is his realm and isn't.
Within it.
Yes, it's within it. Because we know in the prophetic word, going all the way back to Genesis, that Yahweh declares he will reclaim that which was lost by Adam and hand it over to Satan. He will reclaim all of it. And he'll repair what happened at Babel, and he'll repair what happened in Genesis 6. He's going to repair all of it, put it back all under his rule. And we are told that at one point, he'll give all of that to the Son. But if you were paying attention in the book of John, he tells us that he also handed that authority over to the apostles. That's in one of the passages in this gospel, and that he's sharing it with them, then there in the present. That's kingdom language too.
Well, in this area is where the Jews are seeking to kill him.
Yep.
But they're afraid of his apostles. They're afraid of what might happen to them.
Remember earlier in the Gospel of John, Caiaphas tells us they knew who he was. They knew he was the Messiah. Remember in the passage where it's talking about better to put one man to death, but he says, because if we don't, this man will bring back the lost people of the house of Israel and bring them all back, and everybody in the world will believe in him.
So, question on that then. So, if you're a Jew in the first century and you believe in Yahweh, singular,
yes,
and you see this guy coming to earth, Yeshua, claiming to be God,
yep.
but they see him praying to God, did that cook their noodles, or was that normal to them that God was here on earth if he's claiming to be God, praying to God up in the heavenly realm?
Well, this is, okay, the question is, if you're a first century Jew believing in Yahweh, singular, how would Yeshua coming down claiming to be God as well, and then but yet still praying to Yahweh in heaven, how would that have affected them?
Dualistic.
Remember that they didn't believe in just one Yahweh, they believed in two. Even at that time, this was known. This is one of the things Dr. Heiser has helped with, and all he's really doing is bringing the rabbinical writings to you. This has existed for a long time. This goes all the way back to the earliest rabbinical writings we have, because there are two Yahwehs in heaven, what they call the two Yahwehs in heaven. Because anytime in the Old Testament, and this is why I did that one class on my show on making sure you pay attention to the concepts. So anytime you're in the Old Testament, you run into Yahweh physically talking to somebody, and the Old Testament says, hey, he's there personally, you're talking to him. You cannot be talking to Yahweh the Father because he's pure spirit, and you wouldn't survive. So how many times do we see in the scriptures where somebody's like, woe unto me, I'm done under, I'm going to die because I've seen Yahweh. But yet they don't die. So they're used to two Yahwehs. They know there's something weird there. They don't explain just what it is. Hold on, brother, let me get her first, then you. Right. I've seen the Father and lived. Just a second, Mr. Anthony. William was next.
It says, on earth as in heaven, that would make Yeshua Yahweh's earth shadow.
Hold on to that. We'll come right back to it because that's good.
He says, I come in my Father's name.
Yeah, in his Shem.
And meaning his authority. And he says, all that I speak to you, I was given by the Father.
Yes.
And then when he died, his last words, which were in Aramaic, is to his Father. The number not to anyone else.
Yes, but then there's also a part in John where we'll get to here shortly that he declares to be Yahweh. He does. If we understand the concept of what he's doing, he's clearly telling us. He tells the apostles, "Do you not yet understand who I am?" And they're asking about the Father in that passage. We'll come back to that one though, Anthony. But I want to get back to the earth shadow. So we remember when Moses is on the mountain. And Yahweh's going to show himself to him, the real himself. Shows his backside with a veiled hand over him. Yeah. Because if he's looked at him and straight up, he'd be dead.
And he was still glowing like
Right. Earth shadow. This flesh is a veil. Yeah. But Yeshua, in a lot of ways, it might be proper to think of him as Yahweh in a fleshly veil. Now, he's part of Yahweh, not the complete Father. He's part of. But at the same time, he does things and accepts things that only the Creator. In John, he's talking about he forgives. Come on, folks, let's look at this. He forgives sins. He heals. He raises from the dead. He accepts worship. He gives commandments. Even if it's him doing it in the name of the Father, he's giving them. He says, "These are my commandments I give you." Well, who's the only one that's allowed to give us commandments in this regard? The Creator, right? El Elyon, El Most High. So he can't be just a messenger for Yahweh. He has got to be carrying more than just that. Because if it was a messenger, look what the angels do in the visions of the prophets. They'll say, "I'm a messenger for El Elyon, the Most High." And sometimes the prophets bow down to worship him. What do all the normal angels do? Stand up. Don't do that. I'm just a servant. Does Yeshua ever do that to somebody who kneels down to worship him? No. He accepts the worship. That means he's not just a normal messenger. He can't be. Otherwise, it's blasphemy. And it's a form of apostasy. He's taking something that does not belong to him. And then when he talks in John, toward the later end of John, talks about my glory. These things are going to be done to glorify me. It's the type of glory that belongs only to El Elyon. So how this works, Anthony, I don't know, but I agree with you in this regard. We're not looking at an image of the Trinity the way the Catholic Church teaches it. We're not. Okay, we are not. I think what we're looking at is a part or piece of who the Father is, put into a fleshly temple to veil himself from us so that we don't die in it, so that he can deal one-on-one with us in the way the creation was made.
I see a duality, but I don't see a Trinity.
I agree with you in that one. Okay, but I can't escape and I saw you, Ashley. I can't escape the fact that there are passages in here where he's declaring himself to be Yahweh. When Pilate says, "Oh, so you're the king of the Jews," he doesn't deny it. Well, if you're the king of the Jews, you are the king of the kingdom of Yahweh, then who are you? You're not the king as in David, the fleshly king. That's not the one that's in picture there. Now, Pilate might have thought that, but I'm pretty darn sure when you look at the greater context of the conversation and the way Yeshua was steering it, that's not what's in Yeshua's mind, because he's talking about his kingdom. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say John 14:10 basically confirms what you were saying about a piece of the Father being in him or whatever, where it's saying, "Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own initiative, but the Father abiding in me."
Mm-hmm. See, now that would be a case where if he is not Yahweh, right. But now if the Father is abiding in him, and he's not Yahweh, that's blasphemy.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, that's one of the ones I had written. Yes, ma'am. Excellent observation. What it means, I don't think we will clearly understand it in this life. The whole point, I would ask you to make sure, however you conceive of it, just be aware that there's intentional blurring right there by Yeshua himself. And then if you're paying attention carefully, he's also blurring his identity with that of the Holy Spirit as well. Intentionally mixing them.
And after that, he talks about if you know him, he abides in you, just like he abides
Yes.
in him. So
And then you need to look up what
Spirit.
abide means. It's like keep, dwell within, obey, live according to, become one, mold yourself in this. Yeah, that's a big word. Did you have something?
Yeah, and that was a perfect segue into 16:12.
Okay.
He said, Yeshua is saying, I have many more things to say to you,
Mm-hmm.
but I cannot bear them at the present time. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all truth. For he will not speak on his own, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will disclose to you what is to come. He will glorify me, for he will take from mine and will disclose it to you. All things that the Father has are mine. This is why I said that he takes from mine and will disclose it to you. He is talking in a Trinity language there.
Yeah, but
we
it's
need to slow down and
right,
digest
but
it.
this is a tough issue that I have not directly tackled head on yet with the Trinity, because I'm studying this one still. I reject the Trinity in the sense that the Catholic Church teaches it.
Completely.
Okay. I reject the Trinity in the way our Mormon brothers and sisters see it.
Amen.
Absolutely.
But the concept of some sort of intentional mixing in three modals, if that might be a better word, it's in your scriptures.
I don't see it.
I know you don't see it, brother, but look, he tells us that the Father's going to send the Spirit, correct?
That's a power that enables people to say and do things like the Almighty Yahweh did. I mean, like his anointed son did on earth. He says, until I go, the Comforter can't be sent or won't be sent.
Mm-hmm.
That's power. That's not a person. He doesn't sit at a throne on the left-hand side. He doesn't have a name. I mean, it could go on and on and on why it is not a persona, not a person. And I'll shut up.
No, you're all right, brother. Hey, look, no. Anthony is being a faithful disciple here. I appreciate the heck out of him. He's riding brake on us so that we'll go slow. That's very valuable. Okay, just don't keep that. That's a service to us. But at the same time, brother, the language that's being used, you don't have to agree with me, but be aware of it, because Yeshua is talking about the Ruach as he's personifying it on purpose. But the point I want to point out is he tells us earlier the Father will send the Spirit. And then in the passage that Sean's reading, he says, I'll send that Spirit. And then he says, the Spirit will be as to me as I am to the Father. And he says, glorify me. And then he says, I have everything the Father has. The king can never give a servant his crown and still be the king. So if Yeshua meant that he has everything the Father has, that's the crown as well. So that's not possible unless the king steps down. If Yeshua is using these metaphors and this symbolic type of language in a way that he doesn't mean for it to be understood the way he's using it, then he's an author of confusion. We know he's not an author of confusion. So some way, shape, or form, something's going on here that we fleshly beings in our finite minds cannot fully understand. And he's doing the best he can to teach it to us, knowing that we're never going to fully understand it. That's the best way I can grasp this language. Because I know, hear, O Israel, your L is one. I got that. And it's not a case of one in lockstep, like three different people marching down the street in perfect unison. They're one in that way, but also one in identity somehow or another. Not just power, but everything. If it's just power, electricity does not comfort. And yet we're told the Spirit will comfort. Electricity does not teach, and yet we're told the Spirit will teach. So all I'm pointing out is that
Well, I was raised in Catholicism, excuse me.
I was too.
Okay. I mean, we were steeped in the Trinity.
Right.
And we never questioned it because we would be questioning an authority, a religious authority.
Exactly.
However, when we got away from Catholicism and we read that it didn't exist before the year 321 at the Council of Nicaea, and if it hadn't been for Constantine, there wouldn't have been a council.
No, I understand.
So it was invented. The
But the idea of the Trinity goes back hundreds of years before the Council of Nicene, and not just in Christianity. What I'm talking about is in the whole area of the Middle East, even in the pagan world.
pagan concept. Pagan, P-A-G-A-N.
Right, but where do the pagans get every one of their concepts from? That which came before them.
I give up. I don't know.
That which came before them. All your pagan, I've been researching this for a while because I've been on this trail that you and I have been pursuing for a while with the Trinity, and being former Catholics. This is a sore subject for both of us. But everything I've ever found where the pagans get a hold of, they're perverting that which they already knew from before with the patriarchs that got carried down from Noah. They're taking on the memory that came from before the flood, the way things were for the garden, and they're carrying it down and they're perverting it. And I know that you don't necessarily do this, but I've accepted the divine council worldview, where there's a divine spirit put over all the different nations. This is Genesis 11, 10, and 11 area. And it's also affirmed in Deuteronomy 32. So whatever's going on there, there's a spiritual being. Like in Daniel, there's a prince of Persia, there's a prince of Greece, there's a prince over Israel, Michael. These beings were tasked with teach the people in this nation about me, Yahweh, and they didn't do it. But none of these beings don't invent, they don't create. They take what's already been and they pervert it. So a lot of what we think of as a pagan creation is actually, in my mind, in my view, my opinion, it's a perversion of what had already been, what Yahweh had created in the beginning and was meant to be. They've perverted it. So what happens is we look back on it and we don't think before the flood. We think just right there, stop, pagan world. Okay, so we've got to reject that. You know, your secularists will come along and say, see, that's where the Messiah comes from in Israel. Israel just took it from the pagan world around them. I'd be like, well, Noah existed with Job before all that mess, and it goes back before Noah. We know about the Messiah coming in Genesis. So this idea from the pagan world of a Messiah is a perversion of the truth, and Moses is trying to correct the perversion back to the truth. So if you have a perversion of the idea of the Trinity in the pagan world, it may be strictly pagan. Do not dismiss the possibility that's a twisting of what was originally understood. It could be trying to put it back in its proper framework. There's a lot of the stuff in the Bible that's like that skeptics will look at and say, see, it proves that Israel's just copying their pagan neighbors. But that's not what the Bible claims. The Bible claims to be a correction of all this perversion that was caused with Genesis 10 and 11 mess. And if you read the rabbis, that's exactly what they say is going on. But, you know, we've got to be careful with the rabbis. So all of this is a case of it's okay not to know, brother, because we have faith in the things that we know we know. So our entry into the kingdom's sound, we've got that. But there's things that we're never going to be able to understand because we're so far removed from it. Just a second, brother. I see both of you, but yes, sir.
And you're absolutely right. We don't have this all figured out, but we have to search the scriptures. And I can tell you from reading the scriptures and my personal experiences that I've walked in the spirit myself many times, and I don't understand it. But Bonnie has witnessed it, where I'll be talking with somebody at midnight and I'm witnessing to them things I've never spoken in my life, concepts I have never ever had entered my mind before. And it's not just knowledge, because if you read here, it says the Spirit will lead you to truth. You brought up a very good point, comfort also, because there's been a lot of times now, not witnessing, we're just talking about being with Yahweh. I've walked in the Spirit at times where I feel such comfort that my life could just be gone and I wouldn't care, because I have so much peace, so much tranquility from that Spirit. But I'll tell you, I don't understand it. I don't understand how it comes, where it goes. I don't get it at all, but it's definitely there.
Welcome to faith.
Right.
Quick related rabbit, but one thing I've noticed is how people have been, and the Bible, it's been said to baptize in the name of the Son, Father, and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, but this is where Anthony's reservations could be a good thing, man.
Yeah.
Baptize in the name of the Father, my representative Messiah, and my power. Concept and context is important. We as humans have a nasty little habit of the Spirit gives us a little piece and we cling on to that and we quit looking. Yeah, or we twist it to our own purposes and we quit looking and we're happy to just reside there and we never grow. Okay, well, I'm off the milk, I'm on to bread. Man, bread's cool. Yeah, but you can have toast and then you can get into meat. Oh, no, I'm happy with my bread. And that's where you stay. And that's not a good thing. Wait a minute. Were you done?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say it was just something that's been on my mind / observation more type deal.
No, that's good. That's good. Yes, sir.
In support of what you were saying about paganism takes and twists what Yahweh started with, we have to remember that Satan, the enemy, said he wanted to be like Yahweh. In fact, he wanted to sit on his throne and be on the top of the mountain that was where Yahweh is supposed at. Satan does not come up with anything new. He cannot create. He always has to take what Yahweh built and use it for his own purpose. And of course, to do that, he has to twist it. And so we have to be very careful that what we're looking at, the people that say, well, it was taken from paganism. Well, no, paganism was actually taken from the worship of the true God.
Mm-hmm.
But also we have to be very careful. Yahweh is so far beyond us. There is no way we can possibly ever understand him. Even when we are glorified in heaven in his presence, we still will not be able to understand the full aspect of who Yahweh is. Because we're still finite beings. We are still created beings. And I believe part of the reason is we're just in different universes, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
Yahweh is outside of this universe. He made it. He's not in it. So even when we talk about multidimensional, we're still putting him in this universe and trying to explain it through things. Bible says specifically, without faith, you cannot please Yahweh. We have to have faith in the things we don't understand and just accept what the Bible says. Does that mean we quit there? No. In fact, we are to search and study and to continue to try to understand and learn more of what He has for us. Because that Jesus, our Creator, also. So,
And just kind of tagging on to what Ray's saying, when we look at paganism, we put this black line between paganism and the truth. But that's not the way it was. If you look at the children of Israel, when they came out of Mitzrayim and they made the golden calf, what did they say?
Yeah.
We're going to worship Yahweh.
Behold, Israel, Yahweh who brought you out.
who brought
And
you out of
yeah,
Mitzrayim.
they're
So
trying
they
to, yes.
It's mixing, and we don't see that from our perspective now. So we have to understand that this stuff was integrated and
Yep.
intertwined. It's kind of like when you're talking about the Book of Enoch in the New Testament. That stuff's intertwined here, and you have to understand those things and those relationships between them to fully comprehend all this stuff.
Yes.
So that's where we got, and that makes it difficult because that's kind of what we've got here with the Trinity. Is those are concepts that are intertwined, and we don't know what that thread is that goes in between them. And it's probably like we've been talking, it's intentional that we don't know all those things.
It's real easy to twist it too, because the pagan world did have a concept of a Trinity, but it was much more closely aligned to the way the Mormons run with it. 3 actual individuals that work as a godhead, like an oligarchy. Okay, so that existed in the pagan world. We know that. But that doesn't mean that it's never been a part of what Yahweh wanted us to understand. It's just that we can really easily, being so far removed from the original truth in the garden, we can easily mess it up. We want to understand it, so we start making up our our own understanding of what it means when we should keep it on the shelf of things we don't know. You know, the shelf on the left hand, this up here I know for sure. Yahweh is El Elyon, Yeshua is the Messiah, his son, whatever that means, but I know he's the Messiah. You know,
Hebrews 12:1, somebody can read it.
Hebrews, who's got their phone out that can hunt that up real fast for us? Hebrews 12:1. I'm hunting. I don't have my tabs in my. All right.
Therefore, let us also, seeing we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Looking to Yeshua, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Well, that one we can definitely put on the shelf if we know for sure.
We know for sure
Mhm.
that he did endure it, and he did go and he sat down according to the word on the right hand of the Father, and he intercedes for us, as I believe. Now that's a Joellen belief. I do believe he still does today.
Mhm.
And that spirit, everybody gets so confused about that spirit. That spirit is them. It's who they are. It is their character, their being. That's like me. That's like you. Your spirit is different than my spirit. We are individual spirits as far as that part goes. But when we let that spirit, he said he was going to, when he left here, he told them, I'm going to send you what?
The Comforter, Holy Spirit.
And that was the only difference between these folks over here in this bigger part of the book and those folks over there on that other part of the book. That was when he left, he sent back the Spirit.
No, but the Spirit's not new because he's in the Old Testament.
Absolutely not. In the Hebrew,
Mhm.
I'm looking at your students now. Did you all say that's a feminine?
Mhm.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But remember, we're talking about the language form of feminine and masculine. There are German words that are given feminine too that are definitely masculine in form. It's a gender thing. But no, that Yahweh is referred to in the feminine form in the Hebrew as well, in several places. But real quick before we leave this one and move on, if there's not something to the idea of 3 in 1, why does that number 3 ring in your scriptures from Genesis to the end of Revelation? That number comes up a lot. There's something there. Just like 7 rings a lot. There's something there. 5 rings a lot, especially in the parables. There's something there. It's meant to draw our attention to it. Our problem is we don't want it over here on the shelf of I don't know. We want to put it on the I know it for sure. So we invent and we fill in holes, and then we come up with bad doctrine in the process. We make ourselves a bull. Behold, Israel, Yahweh, who took you out of Egypt. We did that before the mountain in the Exodus. Guess where else they did the exact same thing? When the house of Israel separates from the house of Judah, they make 2 bulls and they say, behold, Israel, your God who brought you out of Egypt. That's us trying to make Yahweh dance to our tune, and we get it out of line with what it's supposed to be.
Just something really, really small to summarize a very big point we really didn't talk about. Function is more important than fashion.
Yes.
So, like Zizia, for example. Some people wear 4, some people have blue, some people, I don't care. Wear the Zizia because there's a function there, right?
And the function is?
To look up on it and remember the command.
Right.
So that is the weightier matter of the Torah.
Oh,
if we were to
gosh, that's a good thing.
If we were to go back to that scripture we just read, I don't want to say I don't care, but I'm not as concerned as much as how the Spirit manifests as much as what's its function. And what its function is to comfort us, to guide us in all truth.
Teach us.
And to teach us. And I think that is so cool that Yahweh says in his scriptures, especially in the apostolic writings, seek the Spirit, seek the Spirit many, 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 many times. And so I think sometimes we fall into the trap that this is everything God wrote, and he has nothing more than this. That's a trap.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that in that exact verse we just read, there are so many more things I want to tell you. I mean, so many more things.
And in that verse right there is more mixing. I only tell you what the Father tells me to tell you. I'm going to send the Spirit who's going to tell you the things I want to tell you.
It's going to keep going.
And he deliberately mixes again.
What's the function?
I think one thing we have to be very careful about not getting too much in the body. Yahweh says he gave us a gift called love. We have to love one another. And loving one another doesn't mean when my brother or sister does not see the same thing I see, or Yahweh called them to a different job than I have, that he's any or she's any different, I still need to love them and not condemn them because they don't have the same fight that I might have.
Excellent. Yes, Ray's great point. If we're called to love each other, don't be condemning each other because we don't see eye to eye on everything. Beautiful. I mean, we've got an example here in John. Peter, do you agape me? Well, of course, Yeshua, I phileo you. Feed my sheep, Peter. Peter, do you agape me? Well, yes, Yeshua, I phileo you. Feed my sheep, Peter. Peter, do you phileo me? Lord, you hurt me. You know I phileo you. Feed my sheep, Peter. I've run into so many people who say, well, phileo and agape mean the same thing. They're just being used interchangeably. Then John would not have written him that way. Yeshua says, are you up here yet, Peter? Yeah, Lord, just like I'll die with you. Are you up here yet, Peter? Yeah, Lord, just like you know, I'll die with you before I deny you. I'll come down to you, Peter. Are you with me yet? Yeah, Lord, I'm with you. But now later, we know Peter's hands are stretched out. He's crucified upside down because eventually he got up there. So I was marveling on that one just this morning when I was finishing up the class notes. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, there's many things going on there. And most people look at that and they say, see, Yeshua's telling Peter he's going to be in charge of his church. It's not what's going on. It wasn't until this morning that I finally understood it. All through the Gospels, Peter's weak in his faith. He needs constant reminding and constant setting back up. That's what Yeshua is doing. Before his ascension, he's going to give Peter that one last oomph. Because Peter thinks more of himself than he actually is. He eventually becomes the man he thought he was in the faith. I mean, Peter, if you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. Who is it that cuts off the servant's ear in the garden? It's Peter. He says, I'll never deny you, Lord. I'll stay with you right to the end, even if I have to die with you. And then what's he do? Denies him 3 times. Is he the only apostle there at that scene? Who else is there? John. It's right here. Said John gets him in through the door because he was known to the house, master of that house. What's Ananias there? John says, I knew, he knows me, so I got Peter in the gate. So Peter wasn't the only one there, but he's just the one who denied him. If we pay careful attention to Peter, we're being told through all 4 Gospels, he had a faith issue the whole time. I think this last thing here is Yeshua one more time trying to tell Peter, it'll be all right. You're going to get there. Stick with it. And that never occurred to me until just this morning.
Something else that's very important. Where were all the other disciples?
Well, at this time, they're all still at the fire eating. This is Peter and John following behind him.
I'm saying is where are all the disciples?
Oh, yeah, the disciples.
Peter at least showed up there.
Yes, yes.
A little bit.
We're not going to have time today to go through each passage of this individually, but I made several notes. There's several places in the scripture, especially in John, where Yeshua starts telling them things like, I'm going to give you whatever you declare a man's sins forgiven or a person's sins forgiven, they'll be forgiven. Wherever you say they're not forgiven, they're going to still remain. There are passages like this in John that I think the body is a little too quick to make a bigger blanket and pull them over ourselves. Pay real close attention there to who he's talking to. Like some of the discussion that's at the Last Supper. Those are not all the disciples. Disciple and apostle, those are not the same things. Not all disciples are apostles, but all apostles are disciples. Okay, we sometimes miss this. And it's because we've got chapter and verse in our scriptures, we sometimes miss. We think, okay, he's done talking to them and now he's talking to a new group. Not always. And I'm not telling you that we're wrong with it, but I think we need to be really careful before we take the Messiah's promises and apply them to all believers. Because a lot of times he's talking to a very specific group. There's one clear example in here. Okay. He says, a new command I give you, love each other. See, I got to love everybody in the world. That is not who he's talking to, and it is not who he gave that command to. So if you're going to apply that to everyone in the world, you're doing wrong. How do I know? Because very couple verses later, he says, this is how my disciples will be known. He's talking to the body of believers with that commandment. And we take it and we apply it to the non-believer.
You actually bring up a great point, because at least once a month when I read scriptures, when a chapter ends and a new chapter begins, I go, why did they do that? Because it really does, it can screw with your theology.
Bad, especially when you're reading Paul. If you really want to study Paul, you need a copy of the scriptures that do not have chapter and verse in them anywhere. Yes. Now that's for when you are studying him. If you just want to read him, don't worry about that. But when you really want to actually dig down into what's being taught, if you're reading Paul with chapter and verse in your scriptures, those chapter and verses are going to mess you up. I promise you. Just because of the way we're raised and ingrained in our reading. This is how we sometimes miss. I forget which one of his letters it is. I can't remember. One of his letters, he sets up the context really early in the letter, and he basically chases a giant rabbit for the bulk of the letter, and then he comes back to the original point. And if you're reading the chapter and verse, you think he's gone linear progression of what he's talking about, and it will mess you up. Romans keeps going back and forth. Part of the problem in that is that he's not really chasing a rabbit. It's when I started studying chiasms that I understood what Paul was doing, and I got to find that book and bring it to y'all, show it to you, because he sets it up, and then he comes back and he ends it. And what I always thought was a rabbit was A, B, C, D, D, C, B, A. Paul's a Hebrew, Pharisee of Pharisees. He was writing in a chiasmic form. It comes natural to his way of thinking. But if we read it like it's all linear, especially with our chapters and verses, we totally miss what the point he's trying to make. And we always forget the warning from Peter about Paul. Paul is not easy. Why? Because he's a Pharisee of Pharisees. What's that mean? He knows Torah like we know the back of our hands. And oftentimes he tells us, I'm talking to those of you who know Torah. So those of us raised in the quote-unquote Christian church, the first thing we do is dismiss that. Oh, that's gone. And you totally miss what he's about to tell you.
I always talk to new believers when they start talking to them. I always advise them to completely not read Paul at all until they read the rest of it first.
Very good advice. Leave Paul until your foundation is under you is firm. Leave him until later. Case in point, and it's not always Paul, case in point, most of us come up through some other version of what we think of as the visible church. The Lord's Supper. When do they do that out there in Christianity land? Whenever they feel like, right? When is it supposed to be done? When Passover. Where would we get that from? Oh, I don't know. John chapter 13, maybe? But because we think Torah is no more, we don't realize that the Lord's Supper is still Passover. It wasn't changed. Well, he says whenever you do this. Yeah, whenever you celebrate Passover, you're no longer looking forward, you're looking backward now. So he says, do it in remembrance, because I've already come now. You're no longer looking forward to me. You're looking backwards because I've come. But you're still keeping Passover. It's an appointed time. It was never done away with. Well, he didn't mention that in the Beatitudes. That's the one commandment he skips because it's the seal of Yahweh. He doesn't need to command you with the seal. If you're faithful and you're obedient, the seal is nailed to you, and the evidence is you're keeping Sabbath in the appointed times. The feasts are part of the Sabbaths. They can't be separated. And yet we do. We're not paying attention to our scriptures. And we're all guilty of this, every one of us. We've got certain parts of the scripture that we want to rearrange to suit our understanding or our comfort levels. And if studying our scriptures isn't making us uncomfortable at some point, and we're not having to wrestle with it, we're not doing it right. What's Israel supposed to mean? What's the word mean?
Strive with hell.
You wrestle with Yahweh. So, any other John rabbits? Because I've got that one. Let me see. Got that one. Did you all catch in chapter 14, especially 14 verse 2? Y'all catch the reference to the wedding? The Hebrew wedding. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you, because I am going there to prepare a place for you. The Last Supper. How many of y'all were in my class when we went over the Hebrew wedding ceremony, the traditional full drawn out Hebrew wedding ceremony? Starts with, I stand at the door and knock. What verse do we get that one out of? Revelation, anybody? And then in the Last Supper, we know from the Hebrew wedding that the fourth cup of wine is drank at the actual consummation of the wedding. So what does Yeshua say when he's at the Last Supper? I will not drink this fourth cup. I will not taste of the fruit of the vine again until I come into my kingdom, until the actual wedding is consummated. So what is the supper there that's going on in the Hebrew wedding? We're working out the wedding contract. So his bride is technically married to him at the end of this Last Supper. Hasn't been consummated yet, but he's technically married. So now it's time for the bridegroom to go back home to his father's house and prepare the room for his bride to live in. So from that point forward, nobody knows the day or the hour that the father will send him back to collect his bride. All of this comes to mind when he says this right here. I go now to prepare a place for you. He's telling you the marriage has already been set in place. The new covenant's in place. The house of Israel is now married again. She's no longer a divorced bride. I could give her a get again. Just because it hasn't been consummated doesn't matter. The contract is in place. Where do we see the image of that? Joseph and Mary had not consummated yet, but yet Mary's his wife because the contract had been signed. The Hebrew wedding, you cannot understand the imagery in the scriptures of the salvation process if you don't understand the Hebrew wedding. Because that's how our salvation process is given to us in the scriptures throughout. So you've got to know how the Hebrew wedding worked to see what's being said here. So one little passage in your scripture brings up everything from Genesis to Revelation. Once you understand concept. Never ignore the concept, ever, because it'll lead us astray. When we squabble over the words instead of the concept, Paul should come to mind. If we're squabbling over the individual word rather than the concept, what do y'all think Paul would tell us? He'd be like, stop that. Yeah. Because you're going to split up the body over that, and it's useless. Now, that does not mean that paying attention to the words is irrelevant. We know better than that. What did Paul say not to do? Squabble and split up the body over the words. Concept again, right? You know, like you were saying earlier, look to the purpose. Somebody's been listening to this idiot on the internet when he stresses form and function.
Well, it's actually quite important. I think we can use this when we witness to our Christian brothers and to our family members who God knows what state they're in. You can talk words all the time. A word can trigger somebody.
Mm-hmm.
A word can offend somebody. But to me, if you bring up the weightier matter, the concept, the precept, you get farther with those people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can talk, for example, if you talk about creation and you start splitting hairs over the 6 days of creation, and actually it was this, actually it was that, actually it was this, actually it was that, this was 1,000 years, it was a day, it was the evening and it was night. Well, there was no sun. How was there no evening or night? You could go for hours of words, or you can say, what was the concept of creation? God wanted friends. God wanted to be with us. That's the concept. It's just so much more effective to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is. I got another rabbit for you. John 14, verse 15. If you love me, you will keep and obey my commandments. What does it mean to keep them? That's an ancient use of keep. More than that, brother.
It's to guard,
Yes.
protect,
What is a keep?
cherish.
What is a keep?
A keep is a tower, it's a fortress.
Fortress. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of figured you might know because you come from a country where they're everywhere still in the countryside. A keep is a fortress, and it's meant to guard and protect. That's how the word being used here. Keep, guard them, protect them, defend them. It's more than just obey. Yes, ma'am.
Notice it's interesting, just because it breaks it up so much in that verse. Like if you go back to 13, like whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you will ask anything in my name, I will do it. If you love me, keep my commandments. It's just like if you take away the punctuation, it's
Yes, there was no punctuation in the original. Yes. If then. Oh boy, we've got to do a class on the if thens in Scripture. But you also brought something up. The verse you just read, to whom is he talking there? The apostles or the disciples? He's talking to the apostles there. The apostles were given authority that a lot of us believers had pulled that mantle over our heads as disciples. It was not meant for us. It was given to the apostles. Remember, he says, I've given you the keys to have the kingdom of Yahweh. We think that applies to all of us. You better go back and read that passage. He's talking to specific people right there. It died with them. Okay? The whole purpose of that is proper reverent fear of Yahweh and his word. Okay? We're not at liberty to do with his word whatever the heck we want. It's either our rule book or it isn't. And that requires us to humble ourselves. We got to bend to his will, which requires us to wrestle with him so we understand what that will is. And sometimes we got to be willing to accept a new understanding that we don't like. Other times we've got to be willing to give up what we thought we knew, no matter how much we like it. Often they go hand in hand. Okay, you got to be teachable. Trust me, I understand that one. Whenever I'm not being teachable, I get smacked hard. I've gotten to where I try hard not to kick against the boards because I guess he's come to the point with me that he's a little impatient with me when I fight with him all the time. So now my reminders are painful.
Give it up.
Yeah. And they come quicker these days too. And me being who I am, human, I keep thinking, well, maybe this time I can get away with it. Doesn't work that way. 14:17.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, sir.
Before you jump off that one, that concept is really, really more important than we give credence to, because when you start, because this is new for me, but I am starting to see the microscope widening on Yahweh's kingdom, and I see the king with his son at his right hand, surrounded by 70 elders, surrounded by another ring, surrounded by another ring, and then you get, after many, many rings of authority, you have the apostles, and then after those, you have disciples, and after those, and it is such a kingdom design that I think you're right, because when we don't see that divine kingdom, we try to go kick some very important people out of their chairs and sit in those places of power. And it's scary, actually.
Yeah, if you're trying to kick people who have been given divine authority by the king out of their chair, you better expect to encounter a seraphim in some form or way real quick, because he's coming. Now, you may not see the spiritual seraphim there, it's there been sent to deal with you. But the material form, if you're looking, it'll get you. He'll
It's
get you.
almost like showing up to heaven and there's a big banquet and there's a really beautiful special chair and you just go and sit in it, and you have no idea that, oh, that's not for me.
2 Thessalonians 2 is ringing in my ear right now. So I was reading chapter 14, verse 17. It says, the Spirit of truth. Now remember, I'm reading from an Amplified Bible right now. So it fills in some words and expands on them, but I don't know if it does it in this verse. It says, the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive and take into its heart. So that's added by my scripture here. Because it does not see him or know him, but you know him because he, the Holy Spirit, remains with you continually and will be in you. Spirit of truth. If you listen to my web show, this is what I'm talking about every time I say capital T, truth. Now, half that audience doesn't get that, but those with ears to hear know what I'm saying, especially if you're watching a chalkboard and I do this at you sometimes. But that's the whole point. If you're seeing his truth, you're seeing both the material, natural world truth, and you're seeing the spiritual truth at the same time. Why? Because Yeshua is the Logos made flesh. He's all of those laws and truths made into a fleshly man. So if he's going to send this Spirit, the Father's Spirit, who's going to help you to see the truth, help you see, recognize, and understand Messiah, who is sent to help you see, understand, and recognize and obey the Father, maybe that's the whole purpose of this mixing. I don't know. I just know that one points to the other, who points to the other, who points to the other, who points to the other. And next thing you know, you're in a circle all pointing to each other for the glory of El Elyon. But if you don't see truth, capital T truth, all you're going to see is yourself. You're going to be navel gazing. And I can tell you, as somebody who's tried to train himself to hunt after capital T truth his whole life, if you're really seeking it, it's gonna ouch. And it's gonna wear you out emotionally and mentally because it is tough. It requires digging. And it requires a compass because it's a journey and it's a trek. And if you don't have a compass or tell you where you're going and a chain to anchor you, you'll get lost anyway. There's your compass and your chain. But it was the glory of the Father to bury it. It's the glory of kings to dig it out. That's what we try to do. And ultimately, you guys have heard this with me since I started sharing the way I understand the scriptures with you. Don't ever believe anything because Joe says it. You are responsible for working out your own salvation. I still got things I'm trying to figure out. Things that I don't know I have wrong, things that I'm pretty sure I have wrong, and I'm still trying to work on them. But the things you don't know you have wrong, you don't know you got them wrong. That's one reason you should pay attention to your brothers and sisters in class, because they'll help ride brake on you and get you to question yourself. They're sent to us for a reason. But it says his commandments too. I find that interesting. Because he doesn't say, I came to give you the commandments the Father said. He says, I gave you my commandments. Okay. But later, John's going to write to us something that, boy, I can't wait till I get to do this one on the internet. If you say you know him or love him and you don't obey him, you're a what? Liar. But how can you be a liar if this law was done away with? Oh, well, I don't have to pay attention to that. Paul said he nailed it to the cross. Did you remember what Peter told you about Paul? Be careful with Paul. Because that's not what Paul, well, he is saying that, but it doesn't mean what most people have taken him to mean. But yeah, then we get into, it's 13, 34, and 35 where he's talking to the apostles, and then it repeats again in chapter 15, verse 16. It says, I've chosen you. Excuse me, folks. Sorry about that. But we got to pay attention to the audience in those passages. He's talking to the apostles there. And a lot of times the scriptures will tell us, like in the very end, when he's been crucified, he's risen. It's the 8th day, which that was kind of interesting too. He comes to him the first day after he's risen. And he comes to him the 8th day after he's risen. I don't know that it means anything, but I'm very aware that it's right there at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And I'm wondering if there is a connection there, because the 8th day would be the day after that feast ends. But notice he comes into the room where they're all at. And now it says in the scriptures, it says his disciples are there. I always thought when I was being brought up through the Catholic Church, because they teach wrong, that it was just the apostles in that room. But when you read the rest of the Gospels, we know that some of the women were there, and we know that Thomas is missing. That's why the scriptures tell you it was the disciples. Not all disciples are apostles, but all apostles are disciples. So the apostles were there, less Judas and Thomas, but there were also disciples there as well. What's it mean? It's not an important thing except to train us to pay attention carefully to what's being taught to us here in the scriptures. I fully believe that some of it's there just to help make the story real and human, especially in John's case, because he's an eyewitness. But it's also there to train us to read carefully. Read, slow down, hold your horses, pay attention to what's really being told to you. And man, if we learn to do that with studying Yahweh's word, it'll come back and help us in spades when we use it to apply to the worldly world. Because if you can master it dealing with spiritual things, it's easier to deal with material things. Anything else do y'all have for Chase and John? Anything at all?
Well, going back to the commandments, if you love me, keep my commandments. It's the argument you use that you're planning to use on your show will work. Another one that you can layer into it that I use all the time, and most of the time it works, is when you do run across your family that says, well, the law's done away with. Again, getting hung up on the word can get you in a ditch. But if you get back to the concept of saying, okay, so we can kill, we can rape, we can do whatever we want. They're like, no. The backpedaling begins. So again, not trying to sword fight with them, but just bringing up, oh, so you said it was done away with, so now you're coming halfway over to my side saying some we still do. But you're getting them to realize they're cherry picking.
And now they're smack in the middle of 2 Thessalonians 2. Yeah. Do you have something, brother? So I got one for you. 16:33. And this is just a tangential rabbit. So chapter 16, I had it just like, okay. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation and distress and suffering, but be courageous. I have overcome the world. Tribulation. Greek word thlipsis. I thought we were going to escape the tribulation. And yet he's going to tell us here that if you're going to follow after him and imitate his pattern, you're going to have tribulations the whole time you're in this world. I said, well, no, Joe, we've got to be talking about the tribulation. Why do we keep insisting on putting the in front of things that don't exist in Scripture? We got the tribulation and we got the Antichrist, and yet I have searched this book, stem to stern, put it in my word search, and cannot find the Antichrist anywhere in it. I cannot find the tribulation that way in it. You know, like the great 7 end of the year, 10 of time tribulation. I can't find them. I can find where I'm going to have tribulations as long as I'm a disciple and I try to follow after him and obey Yahweh's word. I'm going to have trouble because why? Because the world's going to hate me. Why? Because it hates him first. Hates truth. Hates capital T truth. The world wants to rewrite itself.
Joe, most of the difficulty may come from the fact that this V, V-A-T is a definite article.
Mm-hmm.
And it's common in English language.
It is in Greek. Ho and tu.
But maybe not in Hebrew.
I don't know about Hebrew, but I do know it's in Greek.
How about you, Ray?
Is there a definite article in Hebrew?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, our 3 Hebrew scholars say, yep. So I think we're not always, exceptions to everything. Ecclesiastes. I think where the comes from a lot of times is we chase after the traditions of man. And most of the time, I'm willing to extend grace and say they start innocently enough because we're trying to understand and be faithful. But pretty soon, once you become vested in that to the point that you become dogmatic, now you've created heresy because you've created it, right, in idolatry. You've created a new doctrine that wasn't supposed to be there. And as long as we remain such that we're constantly willing to question everything we think we know about the scriptures, questioning does not mean doing away with or giving up. Questioning means, okay, let's go back and look at it. Do I really know what I thought I know? And you go through it again and you say, okay, I'm still good. I haven't learned anything new that makes me rethink this. As long as you're still questioning to the end, you're still running your race. You're still wrestling with him all the way to the end. I think that's firmer ground in that way than those of us who think we've got it all figured out and we've arrived. Because I do remember Yeshua condemning people who thought they had it all figured out and they arrived and they didn't need to learn anymore. You know, he called them children of their father, a liar and a murderer from the beginning. I don't ever want to be on that part of the finger, the Messiah's finger. I'd rather be on the part with, oh, so you don't think you know anything, Joe? You don't think you figured any of it out? Nope. No, sir, I don't. I said, okay, but you're still wrestling with it. All right, that's a little better because I haven't claimed anything for myself. As soon as we think we know it, when we've claimed that to ourselves. Gotta be careful with that. Hopefully by now you've noticed that most of the time I don't teach you how to read your scriptures or what you have to make out of them. I just offer you my insight and urge you just to be cautious as you wrestle with them. I know that's all I'm supposed to do. And you guys help me do the same because you see things differently. And a lot of where I stand today is a function of you sharing your pieces of the puzzle with me. So, next Sabbath, we're going to tackle the Sabbaths, the seventh day, and everything that's attached with them. Set apart times. So that's another big subject for you. Anything else before we wrap for the day?
Could you put something on your pin for later tonight?
Yeah, what's up?
Teaching topic?
Yeah.
Prayer.
Just generally open prayer or anything specific?
How to and what can we ask for and what should we be praying about?
Authority, how much authority, how to ask, when to ask, why to ask, who, what, when, where, why.
What our expectations are, receiving,
What ways we overstep in prayer?
'cause
Since he opened the rabbit and it'll wet the whistle, y'all know that the Orthodox Jews have this set series of prayers they go through. How many of y'all are aware that the Lord's Prayer is a abbreviated version of that set series of prayers that the Orthodox? Did you know that? He takes the different prayers that they say every day and he nails them down into one sentence, each one of them. It takes the rabbis 15 minutes to go through their set prayers when they start. How long does it take you to get through the Lord's Prayer? And yet, that's just an abbreviation of the expanded prayer they're saying. I'll share that with you when we do this class.
And that would be cool because, I'll be reading and it's like when you pray. I think this is a big context game because it says when you pray, go into your closet, but you see people praying in public,
And they tell you not to do that.
And then he says, don't pray in public, babbling like the pagans. But then he prays in public. I'm like, okay, what's going on?
What did he say? Don't pray in public. How?
To be seen.
To be seen in babbling. Yes. Right.
It's the same thing.
Exactly.
One could say the rosary beads are an example of repetition
right.
and so forth.
Yes.
Hail Mary.
Yes. That falls under the same category of, thou shalt not judge. And most of our brothers and sisters quit reading right there. But if you keep reading, he goes over so that when you judge righteously. So don't pray that way. Make sure you pray properly in public.
And the thought we always wrestle with, at least I do, when he says, make your prayers and petitions be known. Every time I start praying, I look up, I'm like, you already know all this. I don't get it. It's like, it's silly.
If you're praying that way and it's done righteously, you're being a witness to anybody that's watching you. So, because y'all know, I've confessed I have a very different prayer life from anybody I've ever known. I literally just sit there and talk to him like he's one of y'all sitting in the room. And every now and then, I get a little 1 or 2 or 3 word answer that I know didn't come out of my head, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And I know who talked to me just then. No, that's not the answer. No. And it's never repeated. It's just like, okay, I'm going to leave this right here. You deal with it. So.
And prayer seems to be very important. We're supposed to be doing it, so I want to do it right.
I'll give you a case in point. Something that he told me was going to happen that I kept telling y'all not to do. That thing right there. And what you're doing today.
What, video?
I knew that y'all were going to start doing this way before you did it, and I kept telling you don't do it. I was kicking against the boards the whole way.
You and me both, Joe. I didn't want to do video or anything like that too. But I was
So it's been a couple of weeks now, so I don't mind telling you about that. But I knew y'all were going to do that. He told me you were going to do it. So, and I won't fight it, but if y'all know me, you know why I didn't want that done. You know why I don't want to do the web show that I do. But that's a fight I'm not going to fight. I know what's going to happen if I do. So that'll make me feel better. I'll help you. Wouldn't bother me. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. I enjoyed it. Hope everybody got something out of it. Anybody? What? Just raising your hand? Okay. Rouse.